The global economy is undergoing some pretty significant shifts and changes and challenges. Everybody is trying to adapt to a new trade environment and a new geopolitical backdrop. But within that context, I think sub-Saharan Africa in particular, things are quite constructive. If we look at where we are seeing growth, we're seeing growth obviously in the commodity sector, but we're also seeing growth in services, particularly in South Africa. Looking ahead, Zambia, Zimbabwe are growing at a very robust pace, more than 5% year on year. The growth for South Africa is a little bit more subdued, but it is still positive. And we're hopeful that as some of the trade headwinds perhaps dissipate, we may see a little bit of faster growth in South Africa as well. The demographics are obviously in Africa's favor as well. We have a young growing population. That means they are more likely to be more digital savvy, more tech savvy. I think that's a tremendous potential for services growth in Africa. So moving away from commodities exports and actually looking at how do we move up the value chain? How do we produce more value added stuff? How do we embrace the digital shift and move into a services-based economy? And I think tourism actually plays a really big role in that because it's an area where we have tremendous potential. If you think about why people travel, and Mastercard has done quite a lot of work into looking at the motivations for travel. And we found that people travel for wellness, they travel for wilderness experience, to get back to nature, they travel for food. If they're foodies, they're looking for places that they can try different types of cuisines in one place. And Africa ranks really highly, particularly on the wilderness and the wellness metrics that we published in our travel report in May. But I don't think we take advantage of that enough. We don't necessarily market ourselves to that customer base that's looking for those experiences and saying, here is a destination that you may not have considered before, but we have all of this to offer and at tremendous value, right? So I think it's a sector which will help to create jobs. It's, tourism and hospitality is labor intensive, but it also helps to bring in foreign exchange other than through selling commodities, right? So you're selling services. And I think that's a really interesting opportunity. Look at the macro factors. There are a few things that are driving a rebound in consumer spending. We've seen inflation slow across most of the African economies. And that's been due to, coming off a high base, but it's also been due to lower energy costs. And also a weaker dollar, which means that our currencies are relatively more stable. The cost of imports is less, and so that helps to bring inflation down. And that is allowing consumers to feel the benefit of wage growth that's higher than inflation. So it's restoring some purchasing power for households. At the same time, we've seen central banks around the region reducing interest rates as well. So as inflation comes down, as US rates decline, it gives room for central banks to also lower borrowing costs. So that's another boost for consumers because the cost of their debt is lower as well. And so when we look at the Mastercard spending data, we've seen certainly over the last year, a shift across the board towards more discretionary spending from consumers. So a greater share of their wallet is going to things that they'd like to have, not things that they need to have. And we think that this trend is going to play out through 2026 as well. So I think it's really up to policymakers and governments to make it easier for people to be entrepreneurial. I feel like, given again the young population, they're looking for opportunities, they have bright ideas, they want to do new things, but sometimes the regulations are quite challenging, access to finance is challenging. And so trying to create an environment that's supportive of entrepreneurship, of small businesses, providing access to financing, making sure that the basics of it, electricity, infrastructure, these are all things that will encourage domestic entrepreneurship, but also bring in foreign investment as well. And I think there is a need for that as well.